So to start with, could you just introduce yourselves, please, just so we know who you all are and what your connection is to the Landcraft?
Okay, I'm Leo Evans, and these are all my brothers.
My name's Bjorn, I'm one of George's sons, and this is my brother.
My name's Leif, I'm one of George Evans's 3 sons. From his first marriage, I should add politely.
Yes. I'm Leo, I'm Cameron, and we're 2 of George's sons from his first marriage. And we've come to see as well. So.
And so what's your initial reaction coming onto the Landcraft and you're having spent 15 minutes, 20 minutes looking around?
Absolute delight at seeing this magnificent restoration. Absolutely, I'm in awe of the people who've done this work. It gives me closure personally because, like our father, I dreaded the thought of the ship being left to go to ruin. And the last time I saw it, 26 years ago, it was in a state of virtual ruin. So I think we all share that feeling, I'm sure. Absolute amazement.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just completely gobsmacked. The last time I set foot on the vessel, I must have been about 6 years old. So a lot of my memories are quite vague. But it brings it all back to be here, looking at all the rivets and all of the features of the hull. It's amazing.
A lot of it's still so familiar.
It brings it all. It just brings it all back to life for us.
Yeah.
It's very different now. Obviously, it's as it was designed for its voyage to dday, and it's not like a nightclub as it was. But the soul of the vessel is still there.
Absolutely.
You know.
We're delighted that it's been given back its real, true identity. You know, we knew it as this floating club called the Landfall. I'm not sure how our father felt about that name. You know, it never particularly appealed to me. He was at great pains to make people aware that the Landfall was only a name given to it when it was bought by this group of retired naval officers, merchant naval officers, called the Master Mariners. They decided to call it the Landfall, but he was very much at pains to let people know, well, actually it was called LCT 7074, and it was their Mark III tank landing craft, which carried tanks and troops to Gold Beach, on the 6th of June 1944. He was at tremendous pains to always remind people of that.
So we were talking about this a little bit earlier. What do you think your father's ultimate hope was for that he might be able to do with?
In his own ideal world, he wanted to do something like this to it in Liverpool.
Yeah, this is what he wanted.
His interest in running it as a nightclub was minimal because he wasn't really a nightclub person, as I said. His interest in the ship completely overtook his interest in running it as a nightclub venture. And yes, he ideally, in fact, at one point he paid some metallurgists from a local shipbuilding company to come and inspect the hull of the ship to determine what condition it was in. I think there was quite an expense, his own personal, sort of expense to have these people inspect the hull of the ship. Because he was tremendously concerned about its conservation. And yes, his ideal wish would have been something like this. So all the better that it's finally happened. A terrible shame he couldn't be around to see it, but there you are.
So that really begs the question of how did it come to be a nightclub? How did you get involved?
Well, my father was a car salesman for quite a long time after he was in the army for about 3 years, and then later became a car salesman. Kept that profession into the early 1960s, and then I'm not sure exactly how this happened, but he teamed up with a chap called Colin Peers, who was a chef by profession, and they started a small cafe in the city centre of Liverpool to provide hot food for the late night denizens of the city, people like taxi drivers, foot policemen, nightclub, sort of patrons, people who were sort of walking the streets in the early hours of the morning. And I believe it was called the Hole in the Wall Cafe because it was literally a small opening in a brick wall, and they would serve hot food through this hatch. And then, it was that kind of basic grounding in catering, which my father hadn't had any previous experience of it. But he was a very kind of ambitious sort of businessman. He always had very bright and ambitious ideas in business. And I think somehow they'd have found out that this ship was for sale. This dining club was being offloaded by this Master Mariners, and it was for sale for a very cheap price. And I dare say he just sort of put two and two together and thinking, why don't we move on from this hole in the wall cafe to this floating nightclub? It's only conjecture because I don't actually know. My dad never really sort of told us very much about it, but that's what I've just told you. It's definitely factual.
I think as well what happened was, because obviously the naval maritime industry in Liverpool was in decline in the late 60s, so they really didn't have the footfall that they needed to operate it as a valid business, and that was when they decided to open it as an after-hours nightclub.
Yeah.
So obviously it was very much associated with the naval people who were coming through, the sea captains and the sailors who come through the city.
Yeah, that's right.
But then later on it became something for the people from all over Liverpool. So, for example, I was talking to a family friend the other day, and they were married on board. They had their marriage reception on board, and one of my best friends, he was christened on board as well. And my wife's parents, they talked about it, and they were from far away in Liverpool. They weren't from the city centre. There were people from all over, naval people and otherwise. And I think for the people of Liverpool, it was the association with the sea, and there was that exotic element of it. It was to feel the waves beneath your feet while you drank. That was a feeling that we had as well. We stood on these decks and we felt the swell of the sea.
Because the docks did sway quite a bit. You could feel it moving.
Yeah, basically, when our father took over the boat, it was in Canning Dock, which anyone who's been to Liverpool will know is in the centre of the tourist part of Liverpool.
Right next
now.
to the Life buildings, pretty much.
But then in 1972, the Mersey Docks and Harbour Corporation decided to allow the dock to silt up, so they opened the dock gates.
Leave them open.
And basically anyone who had a vessel in there at that time, they had to get it out or it would never move again. So the decision was taken then to tow it up the river, because the engines were already gone, to Collingwood Dock in Liverpool, which is less salubrious part of Liverpool, and you couldn't really keep it going like it was to get the same sort of footfall. It went a little bit downhill from there on in. That's oddly enough for me, because I'm a bit younger than Leif, that was the part of Liverpool that I associated with the most. Yeah. That's where I used to go to Collingwood Dock, and I still go there today. And the good thing about it is that part of Liverpool's on the up again. We've got the Everton Stadium next door being built.
Yes, strange.
So times change, and it is, but it's wonderful to see it now, and it is in its new home in Portsmouth. So.
And can you describe some of your memories of the different parts of the nightclub as it was then? Earlier we were talking a bit about what you remember being in certain places.
Yes. Well, the room we're standing in right now, the engine room. I stood in just behind where you're standing in the doorway when I was about 8 years old on a Sunday morning, because as I said, we would often, as children, come and visit our dad on the ship for a few hours, while our mother sort of conveniently sort of deposited us here and went shopping in Liverpool. We didn't mind, we were happy to do that. And so, father was happy to have us here, as long as we didn't get up to any mischief. And I stood in this room as an 8-year-old, and beneath the new floor that we're now standing on, with the main engine base, and where you're standing behind you against the wall was an old dilapidated piano. And this room was, I think, used as a dressing room for the bands who performed in. Beyond that wall there was a small stage about a foot off the general tank deck area, and that's where the Life bands used to perform. And on this particular occasion, it was early on a Sunday morning, and there must have been some sort of function before. There was still a set of drums and some PA equipment, guitar amplifier, still set up on the stage. And I kind of sat behind the drum kit, and I remember somebody saying, "Oi, shoo, go away, don't touch that." And that was, sort of, in this end of the ship, where I was really, the back end of the ship, that's what I remember of this. And the main sort of dance area, and the main bar, right at the opposite end of the ship from where we are in And this one was, as I say, I don't. It's quite a hard memory to pin down, but it was definitely a piano, either behind you or at a right angle to the wall. But it was definitely one, and it was as if it had been here for absolutely years and years, completely unplayable. The keys were also pretty much melded together because of the damp. I couldn't move any of them. And yeah, that's my memory of this one, the engine room.
I remember when I was little, you know, because I was, like I say, 5 or 6, but the reception area, which was midships on the starboard side.
That's right,
Yeah, on the starboard side. So you walk into the reception area, and there was an old deep sea diver suit with a big brass helmet. There was also a command console, I don't know what they're called. The big
There's a name for them.
brass levers, forward, aft, full speed ahead. They obviously were nothing to do, they weren't original to the ship. There was also some sort of signalling gun. I think there was a little aquarium pond with terrapins as well, wasn't it? At the time.
I think so. Yeah.
One of the stories I got told was a Liverpool gangster came in, who was well known to everybody, and he saw the gun and he picked the gun up and he said, "You all know who I am, and I'm going to need this," and he walked out with it. That was some of the sort of things that used to go on down there.
Yeah, his reputation became quite dubious.
And I remember when Sven's friend, our eldest brother's friend, his friend Carl Bell fell in the dock, didn't he? Do you remember?
I mean, they were about
fished out.
12 or 13.
And you didn't want to go in the water there at the time. It was horrible. It still is, but it's a bit better now. But yeah.
Toxic.
Apart from that, I remember what is the pilot's cabin upstairs, and that was my dad's office, wasn't it?
That's right.
And I remember the Lord Nelson suite as well.
Right at the far end of the ship. There was where the bow door is. That was a beer barrel storage. It wasn't cellar, but it was a beer barrel storage area. And between that and the bar, there was a room called the Nelson Room. It's sort of the VIP suite, you might call it. And I remember sitting in there, and it was very quiet and peaceful. And there was a photograph of the Master Mariner sitting there, and there was an aquarium. And I think that photograph was taken sometime in the 1950s. And by the time I was a young kid, mooching around on this ship, that aquarium was still there. And still, had fish, tropical fish in it. And that was...
Tell them about the last time you came.
Oh, yes. The very last time I saw the ship, which, as I say, was in 1996, 26 years ago. It was still in the Collingwood dock on the Liverpool side of the Mersey, where it had been since 1972. And I was preparing to leave Liverpool to sort of set up a new life in Shropshire. And I've been sort of visiting friends, tying up loose ends. And I happened to be passing the Collingwood dock, so I decided to stop my car and have a look at the ship. And since it had fallen out of my father's hands, someone else had attempted briefly to run it as a nightclub, but had completely given up on it. The interior had been completely gutted. There were no fixtures or fittings, anything at all. It was a hollow hulk. The roof was still on it over the tank deck, which was its saving grace because, of course, I stopped the rain from getting in. Once the roof had been removed when it was towed over to the other side of the Mersey, it sank because it filled with rainwater. So whoever had gutted it had wisely left the roof on. And I sort of climbed on board the ship. The doors were still in situ, and I sort of, where there once had been a staircase, there was nothing, just this 10-foot drop. So I climbed down the side of the ship onto the tank deck and had a look around, and there was absolutely nothing. Apart from roughly where that tank is parked, up on the tank deck, there was a smashed up, battered old cash register lying on the floor of the tank deck. And I stood and looked at it, and it suddenly struck me that it was almost, in a way, a statement about what had become of the ship. It had fallen into the hands of various people who had tried to exploit it, to make money out of it, until no more could be made. And then it had been abandoned, like this smashed up, jimmied open cash register, which was sitting at my feet, and I thought, this is poetry. It was heartbreaking. It was absolutely, it was a heartbreaking thing to see. But that's my last time I saw the ship until today. That's the state it was in, and that's what I saw.
Brilliant.
So you can imagine how delighted I am to see it. Yeah.
Over the tank deck, there was another sort of level of rooms. Was there? Is that right? What were they used for?
It was sort of an abortive attempt to kind of expand the business of the ship. It would have been an extra dining suite, but it was never really completed. It was just an empty room. Really, I don't ever remember anything happening. But perhaps a few wedding functions were held in it, but other than that, nothing. It was by that time the kind of business had gone into decline. So yes, there was an additional room upstairs, but it never sort of served any particular purpose. by then, the club was failing. That's my memory of it. Anyway, I remember it being built. I remember being on the ship when it was actually being constructed. In fact, one of the guys who was doing the welding was persuaded to fix my little idle pedal car. And one of the axles had snapped on the back, and this chap very kindly welded the wheel back on as he was working building that drum up above us. Yeah. So I was in about 7, I think.
Do you remember anything about the bands that used to play here?
Well, the set of drums that I saw on the stage on that Sunday morning, I seem to remember the word body was written on the bass drum. And years later, there was quite a successful, quite high profile group called Body in the sort of early to mid 70s. And they were well known because they actually used to have pyrotechnics on stage. They had quite grandiose ideas about themselves, it seems. That's all I know personally. And I'm not sure how. I suppose anyone with a bit of trepidation could research it in Liverpool. Put adverts in the local newspapers to see if there are any people who do remember that side of it. Unfortunately, that's all I can tell you personally. That's my memory of it. Sadly.
Thanks.
But there you go.
We probably shouldn't keep you too much longer, but are there any other memories that you have that we haven't talked about of different parts of the landing craft or events that happened on board or anything like that?
Not that I can. Oh yes, actually, there is one story that I think is worth telling. West End, looking from the back of the ship toward the front of the ship, where the main staircase was, about halfway along the tank deck. Above it and to the left was a small DJ booth which looked out onto the dance floor. And whenever I wandered around the ship as a young child, I used to kind of gravitate toward this DJ booth. I was fascinated by it. It had this kind of exclusive, off limits to the general public feel to it. You have to climb this small ladder to get into this little cubby hole that run, wall to wall with sort of vinyl records around you on 2 record decks. And at home at the time, my elder sister and I had kind of figured out how to use our mother's record player. We were playing. My mother had stuff by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the Carpenters, and I developed quite an interest in music. So I climbed up to this DJ booth. I don't think it was on the same occasion when I saw some drum kits and amplifiers. On another occasion, I was sitting in this DJ booth, and on the record decks, on both of them, there was a 45 vinyl single which had been left there from the night before. And I don't know how old I was, but I could read. I was old enough to read because I went to look at what they were. And one of them was there was a guy like Tom Jones, a sort of a crooner called Engelbert Humperdinck, who was popular in the early 1970s. And I knew of him because I'd seen him on television. He was quite popular at the time, and he didn't really sort of do anything for me. He was just this chap who stood there with a microphone going, nothing that really sort of scintillated me particularly. But on the other deck, it said, "All Day and All of the Night, The Kinks." And I hadn't heard of this band, The Kinks, but because I liked stuff like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Carpenters, it had "the" in front of the name, so anything that starts with "the" on the record has got to be interesting. And at this point, there was a man, I don't know who he was one of the staff, appeared behind the bar, noticed me up in the DJ booth, and he said, "What are you doing up there?" sort of moment. And I said, "My daddy said I could sit up here." He said, "What do you mean, who's your daddy?" George Evans. Oh, okay. So he came up to the DJ booth and he said, "Well, actually, Sonny, I've got to test the record decks anyway to make sure they're working for tonight. So you better be off." And I said, "Well, can you put that on?" I pointed to this Kinks record. I said, "Well, can I hear that?" And he said, "Well, all right then." And he switched everything on. He put this. I had never heard of the Kinks. I'd never heard anything by them. And I heard, "All Day and All of the Night," which is of course a classic. It's now an absolute classic by the Kinks at quite a high volume through us. Not a little domestic record player, but a proper sound system in an empty nightclub. As a 7 or 8 year old kid, and it absolutely knocked me for 6. I couldn't believe it. The most incredible sound I'd ever heard. And this chap was sort of, all the time, rather uncomfortably, sort of wanted me to sort of leave. So I said, "Why don't you go and sit down by the bar, son? It sounds better down there." So I sort of climbed reluctantly down out of the DJ booth and went and sat by the bar, and he put something else on. I think because he had to test the other record, right? And for years I didn't know what it was he played. Again, I hadn't heard it before. It was a woman singing with this really powerful, strident voice. Beautiful music. I fell in love with it straight away. found out many, many years later there was Nina Simone, and it was a song called, I believe it's called I've Got a Life. And then it, again, absolutely knocked my lights out. You know, in fact, it was one of my life, my pivotal experience in my life. I was, amazed. That was quite an experience.
Brilliant.
Again, as we walk back into the tank deck, I can picture exactly, I can kind of superimpose my memory of the ship, the layout of it, on all of this which we're seeing now, and remember exactly where it was. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Brilliant. And actually, Bjorn, could you mention about the plaque that you've kindly given us? So what's the story of that, where you got it from?
So yes, when our father passed away, almost 10 years now, isn't it? So Cameron and Leo's mother asked me to come up and help her go through his effects, and that's where I found most of the stuff that we donated. And I found this plaque, which is a brass plaque about that big, which is was made by the people who converted Landfall into a nightclub. So two Liverpool firms, Bell and Burney and J.A. and Bootle. I think one of them is still in existence from my research that I looked at, I'm not sure, but I saw it and I was just, obviously, for what Landfall LCT 7074 has become for everybody here, I didn't really think it had much relevance. And obviously as a sentimental thing, I thought, well, we should keep it, but I've had a big think about it and we've thought about it together, and we believe it belongs with the ship. It's a big part of the record of the journey of LCT 7074, the Landfall, and it really belongs here for posterity, so I think it's only right that it should be here with you.
Thank you very much. Leo and Cameron, have you got any thoughts you want to add? You obviously don't have to say anything. But
I think the only thing, it's really so interesting, and I'm sure for Leo it's the same to like hear, all the memories that these two have with it. And I think for us the main thing is that, when I was born, George was 60, so all the efforts he was making to get the ship up from the dock, I was like 15, 16, and I remember how much he was petitioning the council trying to get it done, and how much it meant to him, and I just think he'd be so honoured that it worked out, and that we're all here together, and it's just that future generations can see it and understand. So I think it's amazing. Yeah, we'd be very proud.
Oh. Yeah, I completely agree. And being here with all the smells and the sounds, what it was like in the Second World War, is very real.
Yeah, they've done an incredible job.
There isn't a smell of stale bitter here, though. That's what it really meant to us.
Not yet.
Stale bitter.
It might be later.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll stop the recording there.